For more than 2 decades, there was a promise hanging quietly in the air around Prince Edward. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't something that made daily headlines. But inside royal circles, everyone knew about it. When Edward married Sophie in 1999, it was widely understood that one day he would inherit his father's title, the Duke of Edinburgh. It wasn't just a ceremonial gesture. It was deeply personal. It was about legacy. Prince Philip had built the Duke of Edinburgh name into something far bigger than a title. Through the Duke of Edinburgh's award, he created a global movement that shaped millions of young lives across more than 140 countries. The title became tied to service, discipline, youth development, and modern royal purpose. And from early Seoul on, Edward showed the strongest interest in continuing that work. Both Philip and the Queen supported the idea that Edward would eventually become Duke of Edinburgh. It was seen almost as a settled matter. The understanding was simple. When the time came, the title would pass to Charles, and then Charles would grant it to Edward. A straightforward transition. At least, that's how it appeared. But when Prince Philip passed away in 2021, the situation quietly shifted. By tradition, the title immediately merged with the crown when Charles became king. Technically, it was his to give. And that's when hesitation began. King Charles had long spoken about a slimmed-down monarchy. Fewer working royals, fewer titles, a more streamlined institution. Some insiders suggested he was reluctant to recreate the dukedom so quickly. Others whispered that he was considering the long-term structure of titles for the next generation. Suddenly, what had once seemed like a guaranteed inheritance became uncertain. For nearly 2 years, there was silence. No formal confirmation, no public reassurance, just careful, measured palace language. Meanwhile, Edward continued working, continuing Philip's charitable initiatives, supporting Sophie, and maintaining a steady, low-profile presence within the firm. What made the delay so delicate was the emotional weight attached to it. This wasn't just about prestige. It was about honoring Philip's direct wishes. The Duke of Edinburgh title had been associated with him for more than 7 decades. To many observers, passing it to Edward felt like completing a circle. Behind the scenes, however, Edward wasn't simply waiting. He had long been involved in managing aspects of the Duke of Edinburgh's award and had developed relationships within its international network. Legal and structural arrangements surrounding the charity were already positioned in ways that ensured continuity. In other words, regardless of the title, Edward had already embedded himself in the legacy. Then in March 2023, on Edward's 59th birthday, the announcement finally came. King Charles formally granted him the title of Duke of Edinburgh. It was presented as a birthday gift, a gesture of goodwill, a fulfillment of long-standing expectations. Publicly, it appeared harmonious, a smooth family moment. But there was a condition attached. Unlike previous creations of the title, this version would not pass down to Edward's son. Upon Edward's death, the dukedom would revert to the crown. It was, in effect, a one-generation grant, a significant detail that signaled Charles's intention to keep tighter control over royal titles in the future. To some royal watchers, that clause changed the narrative. Yes, Edward had secured the title. Yes, the promise had been kept. But it was a limited inheritance, symbolic, not dynastic. And yet, when you look deeper, Edward may have secured something more enduring than a hereditary dukedom. The Duke of Edinburgh's award remains one of the most successful youth development programs in the world. Its structure, trustees, and leadership ensure its mission continues independently of royal title politics. Edward's involvement places him at the center of that legacy in a way that cannot simply expire. There's also the quiet matter of royal residences and long-term leases, arrangements that are often misunderstood. Properties like Bagshot Park, where Edward and Sophie reside, are crown estate holdings leased on extended terms. While they do not represent personal ownership in the traditional sense, they provide stability and continuity. In the royal world, longevity and access often matter more than technical possession. What stands out most in this entire story is Edward's approach. He did not publicly pressure, He did not leak frustrations. He did not challenge his brother openly. Instead, he waited. He continued working. He strengthened his role within the charitable infrastructure. He built influence not through confrontation, but through consistency. In contrast, King Charles has had to balance tradition with modernization. His vision for a streamlined monarchy is shaped by public scrutiny, financial considerations, and generational change. Granting Edward the title, but limiting its inheritance, that reflects that balancing act. It acknowledges the past while signaling a different future. So in the end, this wasn't a dramatic royal showdown. It was something more subtle. A test of patience. A negotiation between legacy and reform. Edward secured what had been delayed, but he did so in a way that preserved family unity and honored his father's memory. And perhaps that's the real victory here, not the title itself, but the quiet assurance that Prince Philip's life work remains in steady hands. In a monarchy often defined by spectacle, this was a story of restraint, of timing, of understanding when to wait and when to step forward. After 24 years, the promise was kept, not loudly, not defiantly, but decisively. Even after the title was finally granted, the story didn't simply end there. In many ways, that moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for Edward, but for the shape of the monarchy itself. Because once the headlines faded, and the birthday congratulations were over, the real question became clear. What kind of Duke of Edinburgh would Edward choose to be? For most of his life, Edward had occupied a quieter space within the royal family. He was never the heir. Never. The spare in the dramatic sense that defined earlier generations. He wasn't surrounded by constant controversy, nor did he command the kind of global spotlight that followed William and Harry. Instead, he built a reputation slowly, through steady appearances, careful speeches, and long-term involvement. In youth and arts organizations, that patience now works in his favor. The Duke of Edinburgh title carries emotional gravity because of Prince Philip's towering presence. Philip was direct, sometimes blunt, often commanding. He defined the role with military precision and relentless energy. Edward, by contrast, leads with calm diplomacy. Where Philip pushed, Edward persuades. Where Philip dominated a room, Edward blends into it. And in today's climate, that softer style may actually resonate more effectively. There's also Sophie, now Duchess of Edinburgh, whose influence should never be underestimated. Over the years, she has built one of the strongest reputations among working royals, particularly through her advocacy on women's rights and conflict-related sexual violence. Her work has earned praise across party lines and international borders. Together, Edward and Sophie present something the monarchy urgently needs: stability without spectacle. And stability matters more than ever. King Charles is shaping a modern monarchy under intense public scrutiny. Every title decision, every role adjustment, every public appearance is examined for symbolism. By granting Edward the dukedom, but limiting its hereditary future, Charles signaled that tradition would continue, but under new rules. It was both a concession and a statement of control. Yet the quiet strength of Edward's position lies in something deeper than formal inheritance. Titles can revert, styles can change, but influence built through decades of service tends to endure. Edward now stands as a senior working royal with constitutional standing, long-term charitable leadership, and direct association with one of the monarchy's most successful global programs. In royal terms, that combination is powerful. There is also the broader family dynamic to consider. With Prince Andrew sidelined from public duties and Prince Harry having stepped away from royal life, the pool of senior working royals narrowed significantly. That reality increased Edward's importance almost overnight. The monarchy may be slimming down, but the workload has not disappeared. If anything, it has intensified. Edward's expanded role reflects that pressure. More engagements, more international representation, more responsibility at a time when public trust in institutions requires careful nurturing. His steady demeanor offers contrast to years of turbulence that have surrounded other members of the family. And perhaps that is why his eventual confirmation as Duke of Edinburgh feels less like a dramatic victory and more like a strategic alignment. It reinforces continuity. It reassures traditionalists. It supports Charles's modernization plan without openly challenging it. It closes one chapter of uncertainty while opening another of quiet consolidation. The interesting part is what happens next, because while the title will not pass to Edward's son James, the work itself can evolve. The Duke of Edinburgh's award continues to expand digitally and globally. Youth engagement is changing, social challenges are shifting. The future of royal relevance depends less on inherited prestige and more on measurable impact. Edward understands that landscape well. He doesn't need the title to dominate headlines. In fact, his strength may lie precisely in not chasing them. The monarchy, after years of internal strain and external criticism, benefits from figures who embody steadiness rather than drama. So this next chapter isn't about rivalry. It isn't about brothers locked in conflict. It's about adaptation, about how an ancient institution absorbs generational change without fracturing, about how promises are fulfilled, even if delayed, and reshaped to fit a different era. Edward waited 24 years for a title connected to his father's legacy. Now he carries it in a monarchy that looks very different from the one Philip knew. The question is no longer whether he secured what was promised. It's how he will define it for the future. And if history is any guide, he'll likely do it the same way he secured it, quietly, patiently, and without needing to raise his voice at all. As the months passed, something subtle began to shift in how people viewed Prince Edward. For years, he had been seen as the quiet son, the steady presence in the background while larger personalities dominated the royal narrative. But now, carrying the title Duke of Edinburgh, his position felt different. Not louder, just heavier, with meaning. Inside the institution, titles matter because they signal hierarchy. Outside the palace gates, however, what matters more is visibility and trust. Edward's approach has always leaned toward the second. He doesn't chase viral moments. He doesn't give explosive interviews. Instead, he shows up, again and again. At youth events, charity functions, military commemorations, and international visits connected to the Duke of Edinburgh's award. That consistency is becoming increasingly valuable to King Charles III. The king is navigating one of the most delicate transitions in modern royal history. He ascended the throne after the long and historic reign of Queen Elizabeth II, inheriting not only the crown, but also a family dynamic already under strain. Public opinion fluctuates quickly in the modern media age, and the monarchy must adapt, without appearing unstable. Edward's reliability provides a kind of quiet reinforcement. While Charles focuses on shaping his vision, environmental advocacy, interfaith dialogue, a streamlined royal structure, Edward strengthens the foundation. Underneath it, the monarchy may be slimming down, but it still requires experienced hands to carry out hundreds of engagements each year. With fewer senior royals actively representing the crown, every steady figure becomes indispensable. And then there is the personal dimension, the legacy of Prince Philip. Philip's shadow remains long. His decades of service defined the role of royal consort and modernized it in ways that often go underappreciated. The Duke of Edinburgh's award was perhaps his most enduring achievement. Today, millions of young people across continents participate in it, often with little awareness of its royal origins. That may be its greatest strength. Edward understands that protecting his father's legacy does not mean imitating him. It means translating it for a new generation. The world Philip served in the 1950s is vastly different from today's digital, socially conscious landscape. Young participants now face mental health pressures, climate anxiety, and economic uncertainty that previous generations did not experience in the same way. The award program continues evolving to meet those realities, and Edward's leadership reflects that evolution. At home, his partnership with Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, adds another layer of stability. Sophie's growing profile internationally has elevated the Edinburgh name beyond ceremony. She has taken on difficult issues with seriousness and empathy, earning respect even among critics of the monarchy. Together they represent a model of royal work that is less about spectacle and more about substance. There's also the next generation quietly observing. Edward's son, James, Earl of Wessex, will not inherit the Duke of Edinburgh title under the current arrangement. That fact alone signals how much the monarchy is changing. For centuries, aristocratic continuity was automatic. Now, it is conditional. The decision ensures that the title can be reshaped again in the future, possibly aligned with King Charles's long-term plans for a leaner royal structure. Some see that limitation as symbolic of tighter control from the top. Others view it as pragmatic modernization. Either way, Edward's acceptance of the condition demonstrated something important: loyalty. He did not publicly object. He did not negotiate through the press. He accepted the framework and moved forward. In a family where public disagreements have sometimes played out dramatically, that restraint stands out. What makes this chapter compelling isn't conflict, it's contrast. Edward's story unfolds without explosions, without sudden twists. It's the slow accumulation of credibility. In a media environment addicted to scandal, that can feel almost radical. Yet the monarchy's survival has often depended less on drama and more on endurance. Institutions built over centuries rarely collapse from a single moment. They erode when consistency disappears. Edward's role, intentionally or not, reinforces that consistency. There's also a deeper constitutional reality at play. As a senior, working royal and counselor of state, Edward holds the authority to stand in for the monarch when required. It's a technical detail that rarely grabs headlines, but it carries weight. It means trust. It means responsibility. It places him firmly within the operational core of the crown. And so this phase of his life feels less like a victory lap and more like a consolidation. The title he waited decades for is now his, but it comes with expectations shaped by a very different era. He must honor the past without being trapped by it. He must support his brother while helping.
With time, the significance of everything that happened begins to look different. What once seemed like a delayed promise now feels like part of a much larger transition, not just for Prince Edward, but for the monarchy as a whole. The British royal family is living through a generational shift unlike any in recent memory. The era of Queen Elizabeth II was defined by continuity and duty that stretched across 70 years. People grew up with one monarch. Stability became the expectation. But under King Charles III, everything feels more fluid. The world moves faster. Public patience is shorter. Media cycles are a relentless dot in that environment. Every role inside the royal structure matters more. Edward's strength has never been dominance. It has been durability. While other members of the family experienced dramatic rises and falls in public opinion, he remained largely steady. Not perfect, not immune to criticism in earlier years, but consistent enough to avoid becoming a central figure in controversy. That steadiness is now paying off in subtle ways. As the Duke of Edinburgh, Edward carries a title rich with symbolism, but he also carries something less visible: institutional memory. He watched his father redefine what it meant to support a monarch. He watched his mother navigate constitutional challenges without public drama. He has seen how carefully balanced the monarchy must be to survive. That perspective shapes how he moves now. There's also the broader public mood to consider. In recent years, debates about the relevance of the monarchy have grown louder, especially among younger generations. Questions about cost, tradition, and representation surface regularly. In this climate, grand gestures matter less than tangible impact. The Duke of Edinburgh's award remains one of the monarchy's strongest arguments for relevance. It directly touches young people's lives. It promotes volunteering, resilience, skill development, and outdoor challenges. It creates stories that are personal, not political. And Edward stands at the center of that ecosystem. By focusing on that work, he avoids becoming entangled in ideological debates. He anchors himself in something practical and broadly supported. It's a strategic position, whether intentional or instinctive. Meanwhile, the monarchy's inner circle continues adjusting. The Prince and Princess of Wales are preparing for a future kingship. Public expectations around them are enormous. That spotlight allows Edward to operate without constant scrutiny. It gives him room to reinforce the structure quietly while others carry the glare of attention. It's also worth noting how differently this generation handles internal tension compared to past eras. Where previous royal conflicts sometimes spilled into open rivalry, today's disputes are filtered through modern communication, advisors, and public relations strategies. The delay in Edward receiving the dukedom could have turned into a visible fracture. Instead, it became a managed transition. That management reflects a lesson learned from recent family strains. Unity, or at least the appearance of it, is no longer optional, it's essential. Edward's acceptance of a non-hereditary dukedom signaled cooperation with his brother's broader modernization plan. It showed that he understood the monarchy cannot simply replicate old patterns without adjustment. Titles that once passed automatically are now tools within a strategic framework, yet none of this diminishes the personal layer. Waiting 24 years for something tied so closely to your father's identity cannot have been easy. Watching public speculation swirl, hearing commentary about what might happen, remaining silent through it all. That requires discipline, and perhaps that discipline defines Edward's entire royal life. He has often been underestimated. Not the most photographed, not the most quoted, rarely the center of global fascination. But institutions sometimes rely most heavily on those who are underestimated. They provide continuity while others capture headlines. As the monarchy continues evolving under King Charles, figures like Edward become stabilizers. They connect past and future without demanding the spotlight. They maintain rhythm while the tempo around them changes. The next challenge will not come from titles alone. It will come from relevance. Can the Duke of Edinburgh role expand its global footprint even further? Can it engage digitally native generations in meaningful ways? Can Edward help demonstrate that the monarchy's value extends beyond ceremony? Those are questions that will define this stage of his life more than the delay ever did. Because in the end, securing the title was only one moment. What truly matters is what he builds with it now. And if the past is any indication, he will build it quietly, brick by brick, reinforcing a monarchy that must constantly adapt while pretending it never wavers. In a family often associated with grandeur. Edward's journey stands out for its restraint. No dramatic speeches, no public battles, just patience, loyalty, and timing. And sometimes, in institutions built on centuries of history, patience is the most powerful strategy of all.